Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brent Putnam. I'm chairman of the Falmouth Board of Selectmen, and this is Behind the Board. It's a monthly show that we're going to start doing. This evening I have my guests with me, Vice Chairman Doug Jones and Town Manager Julian Suso. This is an opportunity on the off weeks when the board isn't having a meeting for us to sit down with you, the folks at home, and share a little bit of what goes on behind the scenes, so to speak, and the larger expanse of town government and the work that's being done. And again, thank you both gentlemen for being here with me this evening. What we're going to be doing, aside from this evening, there'll be a rotating series of guests, and we'll be talking about town things, town business as it comes up, and how town government works, and what the public can expect, and certainly what our roles are in town government. Well, we're not meeting this evening, and certainly, Julian, I wish I could have given you a day off, I guess. But you've got quite a schedule, I guess. It's not just Monday nights, and it's not just 9 to 5 during the day, right?
Well, that's correct, Brent. One of the pleasures I have as town manager is there's a lot of ground to cover on behalf of the Board of Selectmen for whom I work, and Monday nights generally are set aside, as the three of us know, for Selectmen's meetings, but on those Mondays when we don't meet, other things tend to fill the void. This is a good opportunity to talk about some of those kinds of things, but generally with my schedule, for instance, Tuesdays, depending on the time of the year, frequently are Finance Committee meetings. Finance Committee chooses that night generally as their preferred night to meet, although they also meet on Wednesdays and Thursdays. It happens, as I recall, that they're off this week, but I know they're planning to meet again early in November, once or twice prior to the onset of town meeting on November 12th. Curiously, though, just to give some flavor, Wednesday of this week, there's a meeting at the Mass Military Reservation, or Otis base, as many call it, on a planning meeting to which I've been invited to attend and participate, and I look forward to doing that. But at different times I may join the Water Quality Management Committee, or occasionally be invited to join another board or commission to sit in and answer questions, or just to observe, and certainly happy to do that. And it's sort of a capper to a full day of activities, which is not unusual this time of the year. As Brent, as you and Doug know full well, we're well into the budget planning and preparation process, working with department heads on capital and operating spending, which will be coming to the board here in the not too distant future, pursuant to the procedure set in the charter. So it is a busy time, and as we get closer to Veterans Day and November town meeting, things seem to pick up speed. This year is no exception.
A number of people have wanted to know why have we gone to just 2 meetings a week on the first and third Mondays. And as I recall, this came from our retreat this summer, in which we really felt to have the timing set up in such a way that we might have longer meetings twice a week gives us more time to really prepare for what that agenda is. But also, as Brent has certainly been pushing, is in addition to have those 2 meetings, to also have a workshop that sets aside some time that we can really focus on a specific topic, whether it's meetings with another board, or whether last year we had a fantastic one on shellfish in town. And to have that kind of a schedule, I have found much more useful to devote that Monday night, 2 Monday nights a week. It's often there's some very long meetings we have because of it, but it ends up being more, I think, efficient and productive use of our time. In particular because of some of the additional meetings we've been creating for you on the Tuesdays. That upon Brent's suggestion, the two of us meet with Julian every Tuesday evening to look over the agenda coming up the next week, to lay out a game plan as to how we're going to proceed through the next month. And we're not deliberating about topics, but really just doing the setting of the agenda, setting a timetable frame as to how can we fit these arguments or discussions into different time frames. And I found those discussions to be very both informative, useful, and productive as we get ready for our meetings.
And I think it's productive for all of us, and certainly for the office and the folks in the office. I think it's been a lot of folks don't realize the work that goes into setting the agenda and how much time we spend on deliberating. And I shouldn't say deliberating, that's probably the wrong word to use, but trying to figure out how what we're going to put on the agenda, how we're going to put it on the agenda. And I know from week to week, Julian, you said that it was oftentimes a stretch to try to cram the work in.
That's certainly correct, Brent. It's really the job of the staff, once the board has concluded its regular business meeting on a Monday evening, to take the next several days to run down the issues, to answer questions, to give additional background information in preparation for the next time that the board will be sitting down and following up with additional deliberation, additional decision making. And it's not unusual, as Brent, as you and Doug know, for considerable questions to arise, sometimes of a legal nature, sometimes of other background information, and it's the staff's job to run all that down and to get it to you timely enough so that you can prepare for the next meeting to come. And when you're in the sequence where you may have 3 and 4 Mondays a month, for instance, where the board is meeting in regular business session, it presents a considerable difficulty to really catch up, to do the kind of homework that all the board needs us to do to allow you to be more effective. So the first and third Monday format really creates the environment where that can occur, and I think much more effectively for all of us and the staff.
And probably the biggest deliberation we have on those Tuesday afternoons is trying to figure out how long we need to set aside for each of our different topics. And people have wondered, why don't you put the times on the agenda as to when you think you're going to get to each topic? And it's such guesswork already. And even this past Monday night, I think, was very frustrating for some people their item of concern was at the end of the agenda. Mm-hmm. The meeting ran much longer than we thought on 2 or 3 different topics. And at that point, we were in the library, and their alarm system is set automatically to go off at 11. And if we're not out of there by 11 and get all the cameras out and get everyone out of there, we'll have the police showing up to figure out why the alarm is on. And those are the deliberations that we're often trying to figure out is, all right, well, we think this is going to take 10 minutes. This is going to take a half hour. We have 4 topics that are going to take 40 minutes each. We've now filled up that whole agenda. And those are the kind of discussions we end up having every Tuesday night.
And for staff, too, I know, having talked with Diane, that it's often difficult for them, because when we sit down and we arrange an agenda, and when we used to put times on the agenda, then all of a sudden we said, well, we need to move this up because somebody's got to be here at a certain hour, or we have to bring some additional staff in to talk about that agenda item. Then all of a sudden they have to rejuggle the items on the agenda, and now they're rejuggling the times as well. And it's easier, and I'm looking at, for example, the agenda from last week, that it's easier for the staff's perspective, for the board's perspective, for us to have the agenda items listed. And ironically, and I think I had mentioned this myself when I first pressed that we remove the times from the agenda, that we're the only board in town that had items on the agenda, although I think Rebecca had pointed out that the school board has times on their agenda, but every other board, commission, and committee that holds meetings in town, they don't put times on the agenda. So understandably, it's nice to say, yeah, this is going to be at 7:45, and if you show up at 7:45, it'll be there. But like you pointed out, Doug, we'd put times on the agenda in years past, and we almost never have. We'd either be running over or we'd be running behind, and we'd be trying to figure out, okay, well, we can't. We said we'd do this at 7:45, but it's only 7:30. So what do we do for 15 minutes? It's a little bit easier on everybody involved to do it this way.
One other change in the agenda that I appreciate that we've done is to put the summary of actions, which are usually a little bit quicker items, that we've moved them into the front of the agenda. Often we'd have people there just for the summary of actions item. It would be one of the last things that we'd be doing. They'd sit there for 3 hours, 3.5 hours till the end. We would vote their request without much discussion, and they would sit there and say, we sat all there this whole time. You didn't discuss it, you approved it, so we're thrilled you approved it, but couldn't you have done that much earlier? And I think that's one thing that of changing the agenda to put that early on has been very useful.
It's been popular amongst all the members of the board. I haven't heard a single complaint about doing that, so it certainly worked out well. But speaking of meetings, we do have we've got town meeting coming up, and I think we've got some precinct meetings as well. And Doug, are you still a town meeting representative?
I am still a town meeting representative, and I'm actually still the precinct captain for Precinct 1. Despite efforts on my part to suggest someone else could take on this task, they continue to insist that they want me running the precinct meetings. And so just to announce the list of the precinct meetings. These are very useful meetings both for town meeting members and for people who aren't members of the town meeting to get more information about the articles coming up at the town meeting this coming November. We really ask that people not make presentations at these meetings, but ask questions, get the answers, and if they can't get the answers at the precinct meetings, know that the proponents and opponents of the different articles better have those answers for town meeting themselves. And so I just wanted to very quickly list them, that Precinct 1 and 2 are meeting together Wednesday, October 3rd, so this Wednesday, 7 o'clock at the Town Hall Civil Defense Room. Precinct 3 is meeting Wednesday, November 6th at 7 at the Gus Canty Recreation Center. Precinct 4 is also Wednesday, November 6th, and this is at the East Falmouth Elementary School. Precinct 5 and Precinct 6 meet together Thursday, November 7th at 7 at the North Falmouth Elementary School. Precinct 7 is Tuesday, November 5th at the Wacoit Congregational Church. And Precinct 8 and 9 meet on Wednesday, November 6th at 7 o'clock at the Barnstable County Fairgrounds. And so I encourage as many town meeting members and interested residents of Falmouth to try to get to these meetings to get as much information as you can before town meeting starts.
Just a quick break here so the folks at home know that we're going to be taking phone calls this evening. This is an opportunity. There's been a lot of concerns or questions about whether or not the board is taking enough feedback. So this will be an opportunity this evening. If you have a question or a comment, certainly call in. Let's see, they gave me a phone number here for you folks, 508-457-1604. And in about 10 minutes, let's say about 20 past the hour, we'll start taking some phone calls. And if we can answer the questions, we will. If we can't, we'll probably have to get back to you. There may be some things that we can't address right away. So just so everyone's aware of that. So town meeting's coming up. And, well, one of the big key things about town meeting is usually spending. That's essentially what one of the responsibilities of town meeting is, to approve spending articles. The board, we just passed our budget policy statement, which outlines the limits of spending. But this is really the beginning, or maybe the middle of the whole budget process. Julian, do you want to sort of enlighten us as to what the larger process is? When we talked about Finance Committee earlier.
Certainly, Brent, happy to. Pursuant to the town charter, which, as you and Doug know, lays out the general schedule and precepts for the annual financial process. But we had just recently brought to the Board of Selectmen the proposed capital spending package. This is for FY15. And of course, we're about nearly halfway through FY14 now. As members of the board are aware, we run from a July 1st to June 30th fiscal year. So FY14 actually began on July 1st, 2013, and will conclude on June 30th of 2014. So the 2014 budget that we're now following was adopted by town meeting back in April. So what I'm talking about as far as the schedule is in furtherance of preparations for the FY15 budget. So the capital package, the proposed major capital item, equipment, vehicle replacement, etc., building maintenance, those items are updated each year. We ask our department heads to do so. Our finance director, Jennifer Petit, sent that request out a couple of months ago. That was assembled, then brought to the Board of Selectmen. The Selectmen then review it, which has already occurred for FY15, and they forward it to the Finance Committee pursuant to the town charter. So the Finance Committee, really as we speak, has been reviewing potential FY15 capital items. We have also sent out the request for department heads to begin their operation budget requests for FY15. Those are due within the next couple of weeks to the manager's office and to the finance director's office, and I will be assembling that, working with the finance director and department heads, and my proposed FY15 operations budget is due to the Board of Selectmen by Jan 1 of each year, and the board reviews that in a very compressed time frame that the charter gives us, and transmits that also to the Finance Committee to review in anticipation of formal action ultimately by town meeting in the spring or April town meeting each year. Now, interestingly, in November, our sort of tradition has been to look at mid-year capital spending utilizing available free cash, and the upcoming November 12th town meeting is no exception. We have a listing of almost $3 million, a little less than that, in capital spending, largely as a result of good stewardship on the part of town departments and department heads, good work by the Finance Committee and Selectmen in setting goals and policies for spending, and we have a larger than normal amount of free cash, and we are proposing that be allocated to a number of projects which have been deferred for years, some of them, again, because of the recent economic downturn, and we, like so many other municipalities, are just beginning that recovery process. So we're thankful that Selectmen, Finance Committee, and Town Meeting can give some consideration to this larger than normal list of capital projects that we have the luxury of because we have some one-time available monies rather than annual ongoing monies to devote those to capital as we should be. And I should note that in the back of the town meeting booklet, which town meeting members have either received or are about to, there's a long listing of pages of those capital projects and a description of each for your reading pleasure and further understanding, all in preparation for November 12th.
In reading through the warrant, I was quite impressed with the level of detail that was given to support each of the capital requests. There were even photographs of some of the equipment that either was deteriorating or the kind of thing we were looking for. And this was certainly in direct response to last year's town meeting, where town meeting members felt they were not given enough information ahead of time to be able to make the kind of decisions that they wanted to make on the agenda. And I really applaud both your office and Jennifer Petit's to get this information in a readable and usable format so that people really can feel that they know. I think they're willing to support the town on these capital needs, but they want to know. They want the information, and I've been reminded more and more as to how important that is our job as the Board of Selectmen, is not just as the executive committee to make decisions, but to explain to the town meeting and to the townsfolk as to why we make the decisions we do. And I think I've been a bit remiss in not explaining certain votes I make and say, these are the reasons why. I feel I know the reasons, but I think it beholds upon us as selectmen to let the town know why we vote the way we do, why we're supporting certain issues, why we would vote either for or against different capital needs. And I appreciate the feedback I've received from the town on those kinds of issues. And I certainly appreciate getting this information for the capital needs projects.
We're happy we can do it.
And like you said, Doug, there are a lot of folks who have asked for that information in years past, and for one reason or another, it was never forthcoming. In fact, I think you mentioned that the warrant, and I don't know if you wanted to show the folks at home the warrant, that it's a rather large warrant this year because we've got the additional information in there where we didn't have it in years past. And Julian, I don't know if...
Pretty sizable.
It is.
For November 1.
Is this... I know obviously it goes to all the town meeting representatives, but is this something that anybody can walk into, say, the clerk's office or something and get a copy of this? Are there extra copies available?
We do make extra copies available within limits, and I don't know exactly what the printing size was this year, but we do have extra copies. If someone wants to stop by Town Hall, be happy to make them available, and any extras we have, certainly we take to a town meeting on Tuesday, November 12th when they convene as well. There's also one that has been, a copy of the warrant has been printed in the Enterprise this past Friday, so anybody who wants to see it at a glance, it is all there as well.
And that's good information. And I'm wondering also if it's something we couldn't put online on on our page or on the clerk's page. Is that a possibility, I wonder?
Certainly, and we'll be happy to explore that.
Yeah. So it's about 20 past the hour. I don't know that we have any phone calls yet, and if not, we'll just, there are a few other things that we can talk about. All right, so let's see. Precinct meetings and town meeting, actually...
Certainly the Esco is one of the major projects, issues we're going to be dealing with at town meeting, and we spent I think, a very productive meeting last Monday night with the first time, certainly I've been involved, that we've had a joint meeting of the Finance Committee, the School Committee, and the Board of Selectmen. And if people are wondering why were we meeting in a different room last week when we were at the library instead of the town hall, the reason was to be able to get all those people together into one room. It was a very useful discussion. We don't have unanimity among the three groups. Certainly I think it's something that we're going to be looking at very carefully at town meeting. I think that the energy advantages and the finances, the financial position that Esco allows us to do, I personally feel are very useful. I'm not sure if, Julian, if you want to go into more detail.
Certainly.
I know we have the two major projects that are coming up fairly quickly if we can proceed with the Esco project.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Doug. The Esco project is something that we've been working on for at least 2 years. I've been here just barely 2 years, so some of the concepts predate me, although I've been involved with Escos elsewhere in my career. And we've been working with our colleagues on the school side, as well as the Finance Committee, in developing a package of projects. Town meeting, of course, recently authorized our beginning to work with a contractor, in this case, Train, which was identified in meetings and through procurement by the Energy Committee. And under the state statute that enables an Esco process, it really stands for Energy Performance Contracting. And what we do is we look at town and school side buildings and equipment and determine what energy improvements make sense to undertake under the Esco process. And Train, as a contractor, guarantees certain minimal energy savings for things like boiler replacements, window replacements, different heating and ventilating systems and controls, pretty much anything from soup to nuts that relates to energy. Lighting as well. I should not overlook lighting on the interior and exterior of buildings. And they make recommendations for preliminary investments in energy savings and what's anticipated to be saved annually in each of these areas. And then under this same state statute, the town pledges the dollars saved in energy dollars we do not need to spend, and those are utilized to retire the bonded indebtedness that underwrites the Esco process. One of the other advantages of an Esco is that there are state and federal dollars available, and the town of Falmouth has applied for those, that can give you additional interest subsidies. So we've applied for that. We've not been had a confirmation as yet whether we have been one of the recipients of those, but if we are, which we hope to be in some form, that's additional savings for the taxpayer. And it allows, the other beauty of the Esco is it allows these projects to be financed internally without the need for a separate debt exclusion or capital exclusion override for taxpayers. So we live within our means, and I know that's one of the guidelines that broadly the Board of Selectmen has given to me and my colleagues in the administration to do our best to live within the spending guidelines and the revenue set. And the Esco certainly would allow us to do that, subject to town meeting vote and deliberations, which are going to be unfolding in the days to come.
But the Esco savings only go so far in funding the construction and renovations that are going on. Is that correct?
Correct.
I mean, it isn't until fiscal year 2017 that we actually do and realize that we have to come up with some more money to actually fund it.
Yes, that's correct.
But we haven't determined where that money is coming from. It could come maybe from the operating budget. It could come from free cash. It could come from a debt exclusion if we wanted to. And the options are still open to us.
Or it could even come from the money that we're setting aside now from, for example, the meals tax.
Sure.
For these smaller capital projects. I just want to put a hold on this particular discussion. We have someone on the phone right now, and we'll entertain the call.
Hello?
Hello. How are you?
I am well, thank you. Actually, I'm directing this call mainly to Julian, if that's all right with you, Brent.
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, as a year-round resident, all summer long, we have dealt with the abysmal paving job that was done on Main Street. There are craters, there are sunken manholes. Joe Q, at one point, wrote in to you guys, and they did fix a few of them. But I'm just wondering, as citizens, do we have to live for the next 10 years with these craters on Main Street? Will we have Lawrence and Lynch, before the hot plant closes down, come by and trying to fix these things for us? It's a horrible pavement job on Main Street. Thank you very much, Julian, for listening. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you for calling in.
Certainly. Thank you for your call. I know that following that paving job in the late spring of this year, we did have some concerns. I know I walked the project and observed a lot of the paving myself, and I certainly agree that there were some lips on manhole covers that were protruding. We've had some of those repaired. I think there's some additional attention that remains to be given to those, because I recognize that in a few locations there's still a little bit of a bumpy surface, much more so than we would prefer to have. So there'll be a little bit of fine-tuning that we'll be working with Public Works yet to overcome. I will say that I don't think it will be 100% almost as an ice surface smooth ride, because you're always going to have some variations with the number of utilities that we have on the Main Street surface. But you make a very good point. We did correct some, and some adjustments for us still lie ahead. And we thank you for your patience in the meantime.
Okay. Oh, we have another phone call. Hi, you're on the air.
Yes, my question for Selectman Putnam is, we seem to be having a lot of trouble getting volunteers, and even someone who's involved a little bit with the town, I know people who do volunteer, who are qualified, don't get encouraged enough or helped enough to participate. What do we do about that problem?
You know, that's a very good question, and it's something actually that I think for as long as I've been on the board, it's been an issue where we oftentimes have difficulty filling positions on our committees, and we have a number of committee vacancies right now. And actually, you know, we were announcing the precinct meetings earlier. Maybe one of the things that we'll do when we have this monthly show is to announce some of the vacancies we have, as we've done at Selectmen's meetings. But we are trying to fill the gap, and certainly there are some things that the board's been talking about. One of the things that was raised, I can't recall if it was in a prior meeting or maybe at our retreat earlier this summer, but the discussion of having an annual meeting for the chairs of the respective committees. There are a lot of regulations, a lot of laws. We've got open meeting laws, we've got the new Committee Handbook, and I think that's perhaps where the discussion came from, is the Committee Handbook that's been talked about for a number of years now, but we're almost, I think we're pretty close to actually finalizing it and getting it into the hands of the committees. But actually having an annual training session in, say, July or August for all of the chairs of all the committees and anyone else who's interested, to help them through the process of navigating the open meeting laws, of addressing some of the issues or concerns raised with the Committee Handbook, and helping them navigate all the rules. I think perhaps it's a two-sided coin, and you know, Doug, you've been involved in town government for a long time yourself. You can probably offer some insights that I don't have, but obviously it's not just getting interest. I think it's also keeping interest and not overwhelming people, and hopefully this chairman's workshop that we're talking about having will help with that and help people understand the responsibilities and the issues that they need to be concerned about as a committee member. But
some of the other things we've talked about as the selectmen is to looking at which meetings or which committees really need to still exist, as to whether we could combine duties of some committees and give them a little more of a direction. I think the ad hoc committees, for instance, the Capital Advisory Committee, that's given a timetable by which they need to finish their job, makes the committee feel like they're much more productive, gives them a task, gives them a chance to make a recommendation, and then to move on. I think sometimes getting volunteers on advisory committees that are merely advisory and don't always see their recommendations as being able to come to fruition, and sometimes the budget just doesn't allow the Board of Selectmen to approve the recommendations of the advisory committee. I think that ends up being a frustration. And so I think looking at the way the committees exist, can we consolidate some? Can we realize that some just aren't given enough power to be able to do something? And then potentially looking into short-term committees that we might be able to get volunteers for, I think, are ways we may be able to get people feel like they're more sort of bought into the system.
Excellent points, and in fact, that was one of the things I remember a member of our Solid Waste Advisory Committee, Dan Shearer, had once mentioned to me the idea of more ad hoc committees, more of these temporary committees that have a specific purpose for a specific period of time, and then they're dissolved. We've done that only a few times that I can remember. There was a committee for the cranberry bogs a few years back, and then, of course, more recently, the Capital Advisory Committee. But certainly, we oftentimes talk about getting public involvement and getting committees together to help the board make decisions, help gather information. Unfortunately, I think a lot of these committees that may have over the years been brought up and established, they may have outlived their usefulness in some cases. So I don't think we have any other phone calls waiting at this time. So back to the Esco, and so yeah, there was some controversy, I guess, about how we might pay for the Esco, but clearly we have some options, whether it comes out of the operating budget or, as we talked about before we went to the callers, the idea of using some of the funds that we've set aside for the smaller capital projects. And I forget the name of it now, the Capital Reserve Fund.
Yes, Capital Stabilization
The
Fund.
Capital Stabilization Fund. Thank
Yeah.
you, Julian.
Well, Brent, if I could just interject, the Board of Selectmen has shown great leadership in working with the Finance Committee to establish that, and as you correctly point out, you and Doug, this is one of the purposes for it, is to look forward, to allow us, again, to live within our means because you are setting these dollars aside and to be able to finance some of these important elements internally. And again, one of the advantages of the Esco we've touched on is if we can capture some of these interest reduction dollars, it will be an additional benefit to the taxpayers. At the end of the day, they pay for everything, so we look for the most efficient tools that we can muster to get the job done.
Mm-hmm. I think I heard the phone ring. Do we have another phone call? Nope. All right. All right, well, it's about 7:30 now. We can continue. I think we've got a few more things we can talk about this evening. Just so the folks at home know, if you're just joining us now, this is a show we're going to start doing on a monthly basis at the very least to sort of fill in the gaps with what's going on in town. We have our meetings every first and third Monday, but in between there are a lot of other meetings. As we talked about earlier, Julian's schedule is filled with Finance Committee meetings, and of course on Tuesdays, the three of us meet in the afternoon to sit down and plan the upcoming agendas. And there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes. Often members of the board will attend other meetings. I know in years past we've attended, I've attended committee meeting, Bike Waste Committee meetings, Conservation Commission meetings, Planning Board meetings. Of course, we have the Planning Board meetings twice a year that we have with them, but there's a lot more to it than just the usual Monday night meetings, that's for sure.
I certainly think there's a good deal of either question or confusion as to how things get on our agenda. I've received emails from people interested in a topic, and then they've gotten back to me and said, why didn't you put that on the agenda? And I remind them, I've emailed and said, well, this is an item that often is covered by the town manager, covered by our staff, isn't something that the Board of Selectmen would really resolve. And have to remind them that our job is a policy committee. We set policy. We don't put the policy in, we don't then make it implemented. That's up to the town manager. We really don't have all that many things that we can, of issues that we can resolve. You know, for instance, with a concern about the paving, it was appropriately addressed earlier tonight towards Julian, not to the Board of Selectmen. We can't set policy as to how the road gets paved. And I think we just need to remind members of the town that agenda items aren't just because they've asked that something gets discussed to be resolved is appropriate necessarily for the Board of Selectmen.
And it's a good point. In fact, I had communicated to Julian not long ago that we had some requests come in. I think a perfect example is the item that we had on the agenda this past week, where there was we had NSTAR in, and we had a lady in representing POCA, Preserve Our Cape Cod Aquifers, the organization that's popped up with some concerns about the water quality here on the Cape, and how pesticide use relates to that. And initially, I put that to the board because this organization is not a Falmouth organization. The young lady who was making the request is not a Falmouth resident. So in my discussions with Julian about when these sort of requests come to us in the future, it came down to, all right, well, is it from a Falmouth resident or a Falmouth taxpayer? Because obviously we want to give them the highest priority. If it's coming from someone who doesn't live in Falmouth or doesn't have anything to do with the town, we have to put our taxpayers and residents first and not necessarily entertain questions or issues from people who don't live in Falmouth or don't even live in Massachusetts. So that's certainly one of the litmus tests as to, does it get on the board's agenda? Is it somebody who is a Falmouth taxpayer or resident? And I think we have a phone call now, hopefully from a taxpayer or resident. So you're on the air with us. Or maybe not.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, hi. This is Jane.
Hi, Jane.
How are you?
Very well. Yourself?
Pretty good, except I've got laryngitis. First of all, I would like to say this is a great forum. It shows transparency and openness of the Board of Selectmen, especially the chair and the vice chair, town manager. I just happened to be flicking the channels and you were on. I thought it was going to be the repeat of your meeting from a couple weeks ago. But anyways, first of all, I am a chair of a committee. I think you know who I am. And my question is, first of all, I think it's great that you're going to have this workshop for committee chairs. And also I have sent you my comments on the Committee Handbook, which I'm glad to see it's finally going to come to fruition. But my question is, why haven't we heard who our liaisons are going to be to the committees? And my other question kind of transposes into that, to a long-standing committee that no longer is on the website, but you still advertise for positions. And I have been on that committee for a long time, and then when I tried to get back on it after my terms were up, it got derailed, and it was the Transportation Management Commission. And also, you talk about the Capital Advisory Committee. There's an issue that really should be looked in, and that is the parking lot at the Depot Avenue for revenue enhancement money. So those are my questions, and I look forward to listening, and I hope you continue this program. Thank you very much for taking my call, and I hope you'll answer my question.
All right, well, thank you for calling in, Jane, and I do know of you, and it's nice to hear you call in this evening. Thank you. You've given us a few questions there to field. I think, first and foremost, the liaison process is something the board is still working out. Whomever the liaison was last year is still your liaison this year. It's a process. The board has had that discussion a few times about how we oversee the committees. And again, the committee handbook is one of those things, as you pointed out. It's finally coming to fruition. And that's basically the rules, the guidelines, the policies that the various committees need to operate under for those who aren't familiar with the handbook. But then, of course, there's the whole process of oversight with the committees, and that's another issue that the board is still grappling with in terms of how the best way to communicate with the committees, the best way to communicate with the committees. Certainly, if you have a concern, if there's an issue or a question, you can reach out to any member of the board. If you're not certain who your current liaison is, we always try to make ourselves available.
On the Depot Ave parking lot issue, I think it's a great suggestion to look into that. I actually think parking is an issue that would be a great time to have one of our ad hoc committees. I think that it is a townwide issue. It's something that people have responded both positively and negatively to. Some of the ideas about parking on Main Street or in Woods Hole or in the Heights or at the Depot Avenue. And I think that it is related to some of the other issues that we're currently dealing with, such as the special events policy, as to how parking affects different events that we have. And I think that is something we need to look at very, very closely as to how we can do that. I think another issue that came to us this fall that worked very nicely is that we had some citizens in Great Bay Street who are very concerned about their road. Mm-hmm. They emailed us, sent a petition, sent letters to us, and were concerned that their issue didn't become an agenda item. Instead, what happened is the Board of Selectmen passed it on to the town manager, who passed it on to the town engineer, who had the DPW out there, and they came back a month later ready with a report as to what we should do about that and proceed very, very quickly with that. And that's exactly the way the procedure should work. If townspeople have concerns, have questions, they let us know. We'll pass it on to the town manager, and if it's something they can deal with, that happens very quickly. If it's something that needs to be a policy set, we'll then have an agenda item about it. But
And an excellent point about the whole Great Bay Road situation, that is another one of those points that Julian and I have discussed about getting items on the agenda that, Falmouth resident and taxpayer, obviously, but is it something that the board can actually address? Or is it something that we might need to hand off to the town manager and his staff? Because as you've noted, we have different roles. Our role is as a policy-making body, and we set policy. For example, we were talking about the budget earlier, in that we, on an annual basis, are required by the charter to pass a budget policy which establishes the outside limits of spending. So we create this policy, it establishes how much will be spent, but then it lands in the lap of the town manager to take that policy and turn it into an annual budget. So we don't deal with the details, we deal with a lot of the high-level stuff in creating a policy that covers general situations and guidelines so that the town manager can then work through that and follow and establish a process, if you will.
And then to have the town engineer come back to the Board of Selectmen on the Great Bay Road issue and report what he had noticed, what the issues were, what his plan was one of the best ways of getting the information out to the public.
And when it did come back to us, there was finally something for us to do, because with our policy-making authority, we had to say, okay, how are we going to proceed with this? We had to give the town manager some guidance because there were various options provided. But all of them, several of them, in fact, involved closing roads, which, again, it falls under our purview. Right. If a road is going to be closed, the board has to make that decision. So this was a perfect example, Doug, of a situation where something needed to be resolved, but it didn't necessarily belong on our agenda right away. It's something the town manager's office had to resolve. Once there was a point where the board needed to have a decision in the process, it was brought back to us, it was put on our agenda, and you can see the whole process in governance right there.
And it was a great example of how I believe the board could use its time most effectively. In other words, we do all the fact-finding for you and come up with the options and analyses that our town engineer, Peter McConerty, did very well, as you've noted, and then let the board deliberate and determine which course you feel is the best for us to go forward. That decision was made, and I think that is being implemented as we speak. So a great example, and we look forward for more of those opportunities.
It does raise a question that's out there is, we had the report from the town engineer on that one road, yet we haven't had the traditional every 6 months report from the DPW, the director of the DPW that he gives to the Board of Selectmen through a verbal and report in front of us. Instead, he has sent us a written report, and people wanted to know, so what's going on? Why have we changed that? Why aren't we having the director of the DPW out in front of us telling us everything that's going on?
And it's a fair question, and one that I know I've received some emails about it, and I've talked to those individuals on a one-on-one basis, but certainly the general public, I'm sure they'd like to know the answer to that question too. And the short answer is that we don't oversee the DPW, the town manager does. Usually these reports, they've been given to the board out of courtesy in years past, more or less in part because if you go back in the history of the town, we did at one point have a Public Works Commission, that's what I'm thinking of. And the Public Works Commissioners did oversee and manage the whole Department of Public Works. They were sort of like a Board of Selectmen that directly appointed the director of the DPW and managed that aspect of town business. But many years ago, as the town charter changed and a lot of authority was consolidated under the town manager and under the Board of Selectmen, those DPW commissioners essentially were folded into the Board of Selectmen. And so that traditional report was something that was carried on out of respect, acknowledging the fact that we held that sort of dual role of being commissioners of the DPW. But the reporting structure of the town is such that nowadays we don't oversee the director of the DPW. That's something the town manager does. And again, looking at our agendas and how much time we have, these reports, great information, a lot of it, and certainly great information for the general public about what's going on with the roads and the various public works projects in the town. But these are things that these reports could sometimes go on for 2 hours at a stretch. And when we have policy to work on, or we have decisions to make about town meeting articles that are going to be put on the warrant, having information versus having something work to do, we have to err on the side of doing the work as opposed to just listening to a report. So,
and often there wasn't a decision to be made at the end of the report.
Correct.
And that was where the Great Bay Road one was very different. Say, here's the information, this is what's happening, now decide. That there were some times the DPW would come and say, this is the status of things, we need to decide which direction are we going to head with these different projects, and then would be absolutely essential for us to have that report put in front of us. At this time, there was not a step forward that we would be making. There would be some steps that you would be doing based on the report, but nothing that the Board of Selectmen would be following up on.
And absolutely, whether it's this time around or any time we have something that the DPW needs our feedback or the town manager needs our feedback as a board, it'll definitely be on our agenda. It'll definitely be something that the public can expect to see. I do want to go back real quick to the question of standing committees and so on. And one of the things when the board annually has a retreat where we look at our strategic plan. We're required by the charter to have a 5-year strategic plan, and we update it annually. And at our last retreat, one of the things that we talked about in terms of looking ahead and governing the town was the whole committee issue. And like I said, we've touched on the issue of the chairs and what training might need to be done. One of the things that was discussed as well was these workshops that, Doug, you mentioned earlier tonight, and potentially having a workshop in the coming months where we will actually focus on the committees and probably bring in all of the committees, or at least ask the committee chairs to come in to represent their respective committees and look at, as you said, are there opportunities here for merging some committees? Are some committees, have they outlived their usefulness? And as Jane, when she called in and she asked about the Transportation Management Committee, are there some committees that perhaps, are there responsibilities for that committee that perhaps could be handled by another committee that already exists or folded into some town department functions? And certainly this is an opportunity for a workshop and an opportunity for the board to look at streamlining government and our oversight, because as it stands now, I think we've got, I've lost count, I think 3 or 4 dozen committees that we appoint on an annual basis. There's somebody who needs to be appointed to these committees, and that contributes to the first caller asking, or excuse me, the second caller asked about filling committees, and it's certainly one of the issues, that we have so many committees that sometimes it's difficult to find people to fill the positions. And
we even still have some committees that don't have enough members to have a quorum to actually, conduct any business.
Yeah.
And there's any suggestions we can get as to how to get people more interested or willing to volunteer for these, I think would certainly be well served. I know we were also criticized as a board for some of the interviews that we conducted as people were applying for committees. And I want to defend our position a little bit, that we do take the appointments to the different commissions and committees quite seriously. We certainly appreciate everyone willing to put their name forward, volunteer for these committees. But at the same time, we are trying to do our best to both communicate the responsibilities that the committees have and to undertake our own responsibility of appointing people that we feel are going to be able to perform the duties that were being put forward to them. And I've been very impressed with how well those questions have been handled by everybody that we've interviewed. They're not easy questions, but they've handled them beautifully. They've, sometimes felt like they've been put on the spot, but then responded exactly the way I would want to know someone that I was appointing to some regulatory commissions could handle. And certainly having been on the other side of the table, myself having applied for commissions or positions on these committees in the past, I was appointed to the Conservation Commission many years ago. Before I started my work as a selectman, I was a member of the commission. And the interview process, it can be a little intimidating. You're standing up there in front of a whole board of people who, they're very important people sitting behind a table, but the reality is once you get to the other side of the table, you realize it's not as intimidating. You're just like the person who's undergoing the interview, and I think certainly the folks at home would like to impress that upon them, that if you are interested in participating in town government,
Yeah, we're people just like you are too, and the interview process might seem a little intimidating, but it's certainly not our intention to intimidate anyone or scare them. We welcome the opportunity that anyone brings as a contributor to town government, and we certainly look forward to anyone who's willing to step up and volunteer. So,
or even step up for the interview. I think back as to why I even chose to run for selectman. I had first applied to be on the Charter Review Committee and was very interested in it, and it was something that my mother had spent years and years working in the Charter Review Committee. I was fascinated by it, eager to do so, applied, got rejected, was not appointed, and was angry and bitter that I hadn't gotten appointed. I said, well, that's ridiculous. Instead of being bitter, find some other way to get involved. If you really want to, if you care about the town and want to help out, do something else and find another way of helping out and getting politically involved. And it turned out running for selectman was my next choice, and so followed it that way. And encourage people, put your name forward, try it. If the interview process doesn't go so you get appointed, there are many, many other opportunities. We had many people applying for the Veterans Council, and I hope that those people that we weren't able to appoint, we only had so many spots, would consider another committee that they could help out with that still has a similar kind of connection.
And certainly try again next year, because I know the Veterans Council obviously is the popular one right now, but having been on the Conservation Commission and having been a selectman over the years, I can tell you there are a lot of committees, bikeways and beach committees especially come to mind as being very popular committees that folks who are very passionate about biking, or they're very passionate about the town's beaches, and they'll often sit and wait for an opening on these committees, hoping to jump in and get their application in place. So certainly it's the old adage, if at first you don't succeed, try again, and certainly don't be discouraged. It's if you weren't chosen this time around, it's probably not the lack of qualifications so much as there are just so many good choices, and the board has to make a decision at some point. So we've only got a couple minutes left here. I don't think we have any more phone calls, so I think we'll probably just wrap it up at this point. This is Behind the Board. It's going to be a monthly, if not perhaps more often, show that the board is going to be presenting. I'll have other guests. Tonight I want to thank Vice Chair Doug Jones and Town Manager Julian Suso for joining me this evening. We welcome public comment and feedback. I don't know if they've had the opportunity to put up the Selectmen's address, selectmen@falmouthmass.us. If you want to email the board, an email to that address, it's selectmen@falmouthmass.us. That will go to all the members of the board. And so if you have any questions, comments, concerns about town government, certainly that's a good place to start. Thank you both. Thank you to the FCTV crew this evening, and we'll see you all next Monday, that's for sure. Good night.
Good evening.
So we'll